Connor. How are you doing? What's up today?
Guys, doing well. Just getting ready for some early signing period stuff, which always sneaks up on me because I feel like this past weekend was about the first time I've had to catch my breath since August. So, yeah, just doing a little bit of prep and, trying to keep up with the coaching carousel. And, I mean, this thing just continues to spin, and I don't know when exactly it's going to stop. But, in terms of, content and entertainment, life's good right now.
All right, well, two things. One, could you figure out a way to get early signing period title changed to real signing period? Because we know what the deal is with this thing, man. The other thing, too, is talking about coaching carousel here. And we were talking more about everybody's favorite topic, which is coaches' salaries. And Sam Pittman, Jimmy Sexton, his new agent now, has asked for a raise, which would bring him up to $7.1 million over a 7-year contract. And we're just like, yeah, he absolutely deserves a raise. I'm bad at pegging numbers as to what somebody, what somebody is worth right now. But I know Sam Pittman's worth a heck of a lot more than he made these last 2 years. Where do you put him? Where do you set the bar here?
I think that's understandable that he's asking for a raise of that significance. And I think the initial reaction when you see somebody want to have a contract doubled, your initial reaction is going to be like, wow, that's a reach. Why are they trying to get that? Think about the value of what Sam Pittman has brought to that program. They are closing in on a top 25 finish. They are playing in a Florida Bowl game. They are going to be in a much different place going into next year than they've been in any time in recent memory, because getting KJ Jefferson back and having, hopefully being able to retain those coordinators, you would think that sets them up well for success. Now, nothing's over necessarily in terms of the coaching carousel, and there's no guarantee that happens. But you got to think about where it was 3 years ago. And that's probably the biggest argument that Sam Pittman has working in his favor, is you saw what that value is like when you don't have the right person. And when you don't have the right person, you're clueless as a program. And now, given how much we've seen these contracts skyrocket, that includes even Lane Kiffin getting bumped up to over $7 million a year. You look around the conference, and you're like, well, hey, I just turned around a program that was left for dead 2 years ago. And all of a sudden, I feel like I should be making that type of money to where, I don't necessarily need to default to my inexperience. And Sam Pittman was honest about that. And I thought his contract was so friendly to Arkansas and what they were going through to try and avoid another buyout if it just blew up in the first 2 years. So I kind of look at the situation and say, well, I think Hunter Yurachek is going to continue to give Sam Pittman what he wants, because we've seen what it can look like when they don't have their guy. And Arkansas absolutely has their guy.
I think people here are just a little nervous because there have been a contract extension given to Bret Bielema, after, if I remember correctly, a 7-win season, and that kind of blew up in their faces. But it's that's not the same program that Sam Pittman is running. You have a little forward momentum going, and you got two pretty exciting players come in the transfer portal, and it feels like a program that's growing. And look, I mean, the other thing too, Connor, is if people are a little sick and tired about these dollar figures for coaching salary, it ain't going low. It's not going any lower, man. You're about to have this massive influx of money coming into the SEC from ESPN in a couple of years. The contract figures are just going to go higher.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is I don't think Arkansas is going to get caught in this spot where they're having to deal with a lawsuit with Bret Bielema to get out of some of this buyout money. I mean, I think they're in a much different place right now than they were a couple of years ago. Now, one bad year in the SEC can change that conversation, of course. We've seen that across the country. But I think that the way that you have to look at this if you're an Arkansas fan is make your guy happy. Make your guy happy. Hopefully, if you're able to come out of this on the other end with favorable buyout figures, and all of a sudden that buyout doesn't jump to, where it's $15 to $20 million, you should be feeling pretty good about this, because that's kind of the going rate for a quality college football coach in this era. And I don't necessarily think that it'd be some massive overpay. I think that we value these things in a very unique way in this modern era. But you're right; these contracts are only going to get bigger. And 3 years from now, we might look back on $7 million and say, "Man, that's a bargain." And you also don't want to be in this spot where you lose your coach. And I think that's not necessarily something Arkansas fans are worried about right now. They're more worried about that with their coordinators and their head coach. But at the same time, I think Hunter Yurachek is going to want to do right by his guy because he has done nothing but show that he was worth the investment that he made, and a unique investment when it was first presented.
I'm with you, Connor. I mean, ultimately, to me, it comes down to you want to compete with the other big boys in the SEC West and the SEC in general, then you got to pay like the other guys. And that this is just one step further of getting to that spot of retaining a guy that you think that a lot of people on our text line and through our phone line have basically called him the savior of Arkansas football the last few months. Well, if he's the savior, then you got to pay him. And my question, though, first off to you would be, I saw your grading systems came out, and I think you had Sam Pittman at A-, Kendall Browse at A-, and then Barry Odom at a B+. That all sounds pretty positive. I mean, basically off of your own ranking system.
Yeah, that's I think grades are relative, right? We talked about so much in the preseason. Well, what's your expectations for Arkansas? What's it going to look like in year two? Because yeah, you go 3-7 last year, and people are feeling good, right? Mm-hmm. But what are those end of season conversations going to look like once you actually have a little bit of expectations associated with you? And I think that we've seen Sam Pittman rise above that. And part of the reason that he's been able to rise above it is because of the coordinator hires that he was able to make, and the fact that we're now talking about a team that's just in a much different place than what we even thought of coming into 2021. So I think that Sam Pittman deserves a lot of credit. The only knock that I gave him was kind of the midseason lull, which we again saw this year, and there are moments of this season that he's going to want to have back, of course, but the way that they finished certainly bodes well and certainly would suggest that he's able to kind of deal with some in-season adversity. That's kind of what I think is important to look at with some of these head coaches. What does it look like if you're losing a key player here, key player there? How do you make those adjustments? Have you hired the right assistants? Do you have the right assistants in place to be able to make those necessary moves? And I think Sam Pittman did that. And I think by virtue of getting to 8-4 with a potential 9th win at stake here in a couple of weeks, I think every Arkansas fan would have looked at that in the preseason and said, yep, sign me up for that.
I think they would too. How freaked out should people in Auburn, Alabama be with Tank Bigsby and Bo Nix and everybody else seemingly jumping ship and going for survival of their fittest, basically every man for himself mentality?
Yeah, freaked out is there's two different ways to look at it. There's walking into a situation in which you don't expect to be scared and then just, having your what scared out of you. There's that. And then there's, I'm going to a haunted house and I'm expecting that I'm walking in there knowing what's coming. And it might frighten me and it might startle me, but I know what's coming. I think it's a little bit more of the latter with Brian Harsin, the way that this has all unfolded over the course of the last month. Not necessarily shocking news to see that Bo Nix transferred. Not necessarily shocking news to see that Tank Bigsby also reportedly entered the transfer portal, because if you look at his body language over the course of the last month or so, I mean, think about this. Arkansas was the last opponent that Auburn had in which they scored a touchdown in the third or fourth quarter. Wow. I mean, that was mid-October, guys. Like, this was a disaster down the stretch. To lose 4 consecutive games like that, and I know they played Alabama close. They had all their touchdowns in overtime, so that's why we don't count that. But that's why you fire Mike Bobo, because he collapsed. And now all of a sudden Brian Harsin doesn't even have a top 10 recruiting class to turn to. He's going to have to do a lot of work in the transfer portal. This is going to be a very, very touchy situation on the Plains. It is bad. It's not necessarily going to get better anytime soon. And there are a lot of people wondering, man, what is the future hold for Brian Harsin? Because it doesn't look great right now.
That's interesting, too, because, in the first year at Arkansas, you were just looking for some sort of incremental step forward. And you got that in Sam Pittman's first year, and it's anything but that at Auburn for Brian Harsin. It's like, Connor, would it be accurate to describe Auburn as the SEC's fun house, like with the House of Mirrors and yep, kind of the scary fun house of the SEC?
Yeah, it's like the roller coaster ride. It just kind of is. And this season was very much a roller coaster for Auburn. I mean, this is a program that you would look at in the 21st century and say, well, they have the resources, they have the expectations to win consistently. but they've really never won consistently. That's just not been their MO. Even with Gus Malzahn, it wasn't their MO. And they have these random one-off seasons that just kind of make you all of a sudden go, wow, what's Auburn capable of moving forward? And then they're never able to sustain that level of success. So I know that there are a lot of people who are going to have Brian Harsin on the hot seat already going into year 2, and that buyout goes down to $15 million if he's fired at the end of next season. That'll be a number that's very popular, despite the fact that he gave Gus Malzahn $23 million to go away just a year ago. So, yeah, that's kind of par for the course in the Plains these days.
So as you're preparing here for regular signing day, which is on Wednesday, is it safe to say that the most important assistant coach hire so far in the SEC is Frank Wilson being hired by Brian Kelly at LSU? Like, for a guy in Kelly who just still, this video he did with this new recruit that's coming into LSU is one of the most awkward looking things I've ever seen. He's just an awkward man, but he obviously made a hire here that connects with fans at LSU and, more importantly, the recruiting pipeline through the state.
Yeah, it's huge. And I mean, that's the guy who signed Honey Badger and has had such a long track record in the state of Louisiana. That is an immensely important hire, because Brian Kelly's going to take a little bit to get his feet wet in Baton Rouge. All right, like, winning cures all, and a lot of people are going to look at him and say, "Wow, he's just so awkward there. Everything he does is so cringe." If Brian Kelly starts winning football games, nobody's going to think anything he does is awkward. All right, like, that's just the reality of this sport in the world that we live in. But right now, as a guy who is trying to fit into a new area and is putting himself out there maybe more than he would typically do, yeah, it's going to look weird. But it's a good thing that he's got a guy like that in his corner, because you need that. Just like we talked about with Sam Pittman, it's all about the hires that you make and the people that you surround yourself with. That's going to determine how much you can do as a head coach at a new program.
Yeah, you're quirky if you win. You're awkward and weird if you're losing.
Right, so it's like Crash Davis told Nuke in the clubhouse, man.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yep. Same thing. Real quick though, Connor, with Bryce Young winning the Heisman on Saturday, I don't think any of us were shocked or surprised of how much he kind of won by. But does he now automatically, by default, become the best Alabama quarterback of all time since he's got the Heisman?
No, I don't think he's quite there just yet, but he's definitely on his way. If he has another year in which he's like runner-up for the Heisman, then yeah, I don't really think there's much debate about it. But you kind of got to see it over the course of several years, and over the course of at least multiple years, I think would be the thing holding him back. Even like A.J. McCarron didn't have an individual season as good as Bryce Young, and I would take Bryce Young over A.J. McCarron probably. But at the same time, he's got the argument of longevity to having those 2 years and winning a national championship the way that he did. It's TBD on that. I wouldn't be willing to say that just yet at this point of his career. Let's see how he does on the playoff stage, because as we know with Alabama quarterbacks, that's really what your legacy is going to come down to.
All right, Connor, I'm looking forward to reading your next column about reasons to change the name of early signing day period, because I believe in that very, very heavily, and we appreciate you joining us. Have a great week.
BetOnline has you covered for all the holiday season. More props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all sports action. Head to our new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus with the promo code BELIEVE to receive your bonus. That's BLEAV to receive your bonus. And it's not just football. BetOnline has pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, even your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all these amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports.